Hi, welcome back to the channel. Next on the bench is this superb Supermarine Spitfire Mark 18. What appeals about this is the 5-blade prop, probably the best looking Spitfire ever made in my opinion. So let's get cracking with this one. Right, first off, basically identify all the parts for the cockpit. Everything on this kit I would say needs flash removing from it. But underneath all the flash, some of the parts are quite well detailed and it does clean up very nicely. So what I've done, I've just picked up all the parts for the cockpit. I'm going through them individually and cleaning them all up. That's yeah. So, but there's about 3 or 4 bulkheads in there. It's very similar to every other Spitfire kit you'll ever build. I've built quite a lot of Spitfires now, and it's like a miniature version of the 24 scale Spitfire that I've done by Airfix before. So these are all the components that you need to build the cockpit. It's very easy to put together. It's got a pilot in it. The pilot's actually quite good. If you put the pilot in, you can't put the foot control pedals in because I think they get in the way of his feet, but I've not decided if I'm going to put the pilot in yet. Probably, I don't know. I'm going to make it so that I can have that as an option, I think. This is just the seat components. There's 3 pieces to it. It's no big deal. This is the main bulkhead that the seat fastens to. It has mould marks in it to represent holes. I'm basically drilling those mould marks out to create real holes. Just needs 2 different size drill bits to do it. That's the frame that the seat fastens to. And I'm just thinning down the pilot armour plate, headrest plate. It was quite thick in the kit, but it's quite easy to thin it down on some sandpaper and scrape it with a blade as usual. At this point you can fit the front bulkhead, which is the bulkhead that the control panel or instrument panel glues to. So it's advantageous to fit this bulkhead at this point. And I'm just drilling out one of the little holes there for the trim tab wheel because it's too shallow and the wheel doesn't fit in there. I tend to find it's easier to fit most of the components and paint them afterwards than trying to paint them and then glue them on because it doesn't always go well. In the kit it does show that if you want to have the door open for the pilot entrance door, it's moulded closed, so you have to cut the door out. In the kit it supplies another kit door to fit afterwards, so you've just got to carefully cut it away from the fuselage. Just give it a clean up afterwards, obviously. And with the seat now, it's actually been glued together and it's all the glue's dried and stuff. I'm just thinning the side walls down a little bit. And there's a slot in the armour plate as well that I'm not convinced the seat belts go through it actually, but if you look at real Spitfires of this type, there's a slot there. So I'm just recreating the slot instead of just a little moulding mark again. So just a bit more detail that's worth doing if you can do it. It's quite fiddly to cut through though. Tend to use a bit of extra thin to clean up all the bits of flash and burrs that are created by anything like this. And these are the foot pedals and then they're just a solid lump of plastic with a mould mark in it. I'm just thinning those down and drilling the to create proper holes in them. I'm not convinced it's worth doing it because I'm doing it because I can, but just to show the difference between the two, but you can't see them much. Now this is the actual actuation rods that the foot pedals connect to. It takes a lot of cleanup, does that part, and the actual actuation rods that come out of them look a bit scabby, so I've replaced them with metal, which are basically dress pins, and I've drilled them out and put them in there. Again, you can do it if you want, but not easy to see in the finished model. Didn't take long to do, it's only about, I don't know, 15 minutes work tops. If you put the pilot in, don't do hardly any of this stuff because you can't see anything. When you put the pilot in, it shows how tiny the cockpits are on these things. Painted the cockpit green, or most of the components green. All I'm doing there is scraping the paint off the parts so you can see that they're now metal. It scrapes off dead easy off metal because it doesn't bond to it. Just gluing the seat into place. You may notice at this point I've forgotten to put the armour plate for the seating, but I did replace it later on. I'm just picking out some of the details. That's the trim tab wheel, and then you've got the throttle quadrant as well that needs painting black. That's the back of the throttle quadrant. This is the other half of the fuselage. I'm just picking out a bit of detail on that. That's the undercarriage retraction mechanism. And that's obviously the control yoke or joystick. Now we're giving it a generous dousing with Tamiya panel liner, my favourite thing. I used to hate the stuff, I really like it now. I just use it in a different way. I'm not subtle with it at all. I use it as kind of a wash now, and not I don't pick out things with it. I just go for it and then wipe off what I don't want. What I do recommend you do if you're going to do this is to don't put it straight onto normal paint. Make sure you lacquer it afterwards, because it seals the paint and it doesn't soak into the paint too much. And I'm just fitting the decal for the instrument panel with a very generous amount of decal solution to make it conform. And now we're doing a bit of my favourite technique at the moment is dry brushing with some silver paint. I'm using Humbrol enamel silver there because it could come off if you don't want to use it. Use a very, very dry brush, so very subtle. It's surprising how far it goes. And then we're putting the control column into place. And at this point we can actually join the two cockpit tub halves together. And we can fit the seat. I haven't put seat belts in. Two reasons for that. I'm not sure about the pilot situation yet, and another one is I don't have any seat belts for this. It doesn't come with any representation of seat belts whatsoever in the kit. So to fit seat belts properly I'd have to order some aftermarket ones, which I don't have at the moment. I reckon I can probably fit them if I want to. Right, at this stage you can actually fit the cockpit tub into the fuselage. Obviously make sure you paint the other side of the fuselage green and detail it accordingly. Everything pretty much fits really well on this kit. At first glance it looks quite It doesn't have any. It's not modern. It's not a modern kit, but it's been well designed when they've done it, and it still stands the test of time. I don't know when it was made, this one, but I quite like it. Just go through each seam line and just get them to fit together as best you can. They fit quite well. There we go, fuselage complete. Now this is the top, this is where the fuel tank would be, and it's a separate piece that goes onto there. What I did tend to find, I splayed out the actual sides of the cockpit just to make it slightly wider, and then glued the top on. Now we're doing the wing, we're just putting the internal components for the wing, which is basically the undercarriage bays, and then there's two spars at the front, which again are also the undercarriage bays. They fit very well. Again, clean them up first. Don't forget to put the little light on the bottom. It's not a disaster if you didn't, but it's easy if you do put it in now. You'd have to fill it up, fill the hole in. So yeah, it's just a clear lens, but it's no big deal. And at this point you can fit the bottom of the wing. Okay, when you fit the wing, just make sure you fit put some clips on the trilling edges. It's very important that we get a good bond at that point. I'm just bonding the tailplane halves together. They're quite a chunky piece of plastic. They're not very tapered. I don't think they're very accurate, but they are what they are. Fitting the top wing, pretty consistent. It fits really well actually. It gives the impression it doesn't, but if you're careful with it, I haven't had to use any filler at all on this thing. You just have to be mindful of it when you put the parts together. Just glue it together in sections and make sure each part clips together well, or bonds well. Again, I'm putting a clip on that as well, just to make sure it gets level with the tip. And then just go around all of it and just let some extra thin go into each seam. We need good seam bonds there because we're going to sand this quite a lot. Let the whole thing dry completely for a good couple of hours at least. I'm just sanding up all the seam lines and stuff, especially the wing roots. I don't like wing roots showing on these aircraft. They need to be nice and smooth. I use Tamiya sanding pads, different grades, and I use a bit of water on them as well, and it polishes the plastic back up again. So looks quite nice when you finish doing that. I'm just experimenting thinning the trailing edge down, or starting to thin the trailing edge down on the Spitfire, because it is too thick on this kit. They always are on Spitfires, particularly Airfix kits. They've got quite a reputation for having quite chunky trailing edges on just about every kit they make. Gluing in the ailerons at this point. Again, they need to be glued in very firmly because I want to thin those down as well, so if they move it won't work very well. This shows the thickness of the trailing edge, and I know it doesn't look much maybe, but if you look at a real Spitfire, the elegance of the aircraft and the airframe is how it's so thin and smooth, and those trailing edges are so thin on the real one. So I want to emulate that on this model as well. Same goes for the I think the radiators of these, or radiator coolers or something. Again, the edges of those are too chunky as well, so I've thinned those down, and this shows before and after. I'm just gluing them in place here. They fit very well. These are the doors that they can open and close. I think it's an automatic thing that let more or less heat out. Again, need it thinning down. And then we've got the blisters that go on to the front of the engine. That's the landing gear flaps for the rear landing gear. It's a strange sort of setup. Right, now I'm going through a bit more thinning of the wing. It's not laborious. It didn't take that long really. I didn't film all of it. It took about 20 minutes for it to get the wings something how I want them to be. I think it's worth the effort. I think they look a lot nicer when they're accurate to scale. You can't get them pure scale because if you were going to make them as thin as the real aircraft, they'd be so thin you'd cut your fingers on it, and it would break as well. There's plenty of panel details still in those wings even after you've done this because they're quite deep, and you can rescribe them as well. So that's the finished result of the wings being profiled. Right, the pilot, sorry, I've decided to chop his head off. Just to give him more character, because most pilots in kits just tend to be just staring ahead, I suppose, if they're flying an aircraft, but this guy's going to be sat on the ground, so I'm having his head tilted to one side. I'm going to have him so he's waving at somebody. Just adds a bit more character. That's if I use the pilot. You may notice I've chopped his feet off because I can now put the pilot in and take him out at will, and he sits in there quite happily without being glued in, so I can have the model so with or without pilot. Obviously I can't put the seat belts in if I put the pilot in. You just drop him in there. I've got to paint him yet, obviously. And the canopy will close with him doing that as well, which is quite nice. Okay, the model's been primed. Just used Tamiya Rattle Can Primer for this. I find it extremely good paint. Now I need to decide what colours to use for the camo. I generally use RAF green, which it works for just everything I've ever done on the RAF stuff. XF19 for the bottom, and XF83 for the top. And that's the first one we're going to do. I'm not going to do anything fancy with the camo on this. It's just going to be a clean build, so there's going to be no... I don't do pre-shading anyway, so this is the base coat of the top camo. That needs to thoroughly dry, and then we can mask off the green. And I'll do the bottom of the camo last. Okay, the masking's been done. I've just used the rolled white tack to do that, and this is the result of that extensive amount of time to mask it all off. It's gone down really nicely though. I quite like the effect of it. It gives a very subtle soft edge, which is quite good for this model. Now giving it a coat of lacquer primer, sorry. It's a semi-gloss lacquer, is that, just to seal the whole thing, and it needs to go dry for a bit. Then we can move on. I need to actually do the yellow markings for the front of the leading edges. Had to mask those off and paint them yellow. That's the only way around it, but it went okay. They need sealing off yet as well. Now we're trying to do the decal for the front. Now this decal that comes in the kit, it's very optimistic to think that this is actually going to work, because it's got quite a lot of compound curves to conform round, and I've given it a go, but it didn't work. It just didn't do anything. It just sat there. No amount of decal softener did anything to it whatsoever, so I basically abandoned that idea. Okay, so we had to paint it, so I've masked off the rest of the aircraft. It looks a bit excessive as the masking, but any bit of overspray at this point causes an awful lot of work to repair, so I don't think it's a problem to just go a bit over the top of the masking sometimes. So I basically got to paint most of the nose yellow first, and then mask off the black stripes. And this is the result. It's gone quite well actually. I've masked slightly in front of the black so I can get the black line in the right place, and I've given it a coat of gloss varnish. Now the reason for that is when you mask the black lines, I want nice sharp lines, and the gloss surface is much better for putting masking tape on than a matte one, so that's the plan anyway. So I need to let that dry for quite a while before I can go ahead and mask it. In the meantime, we're going to move on to doing the decals. Now I found with the decals that I don't know what it is. Some Airfix, well, most Airfix decals are very, very good, but these have been a little bit troublesome. They don't seem to want to bond very well, and the carrier film on these big numbers underneath the wing are quite bad for silvering. So unfortunately, I'm painstakingly removing as much of the carrier film as I can to remove that problem. It's quite a slow process, but I think it's well worth it, because it doesn't matter how much varnish you put over the top of that. If there's any silver in it, it'll still show, which will spoil the effect. And there we go. I've given the model a decent coat of gloss varnish on the top, and I've given it a coat of satin on the bottom just to seal the decals in. As I said, they're quite fragile, are these decals, and I don't want to catch them and chip them. Now we're moving on to masking the front nose, which is, it looks easier than it really is. It's quite a difficult thing to do, is this. So when I painted the yellow, I did actually leave 0.5 of a millimetre in front of where the line needs to be, just to make sure the black covered up the yellow. I didn't want to leave a yellow band behind, so I'm just putting a tape line up to where the black mask line needs to go. I find it easier to use very thin strips of tape because it conforms to compound curves a lot better than a big piece of tape. Okay, each there's like a yellow, black, yellow, black, yellow, black stripes. So each stripe needs a line putting in. One's as a spacer, so you know where the next line's going to be. So I'm using aluminium self-adhesive roofer's tape to do the masking with, because it conforms to compound curves way better than Tamiya tape does. Because it will bend and stretch will tape aluminium foil. It's very fiddly. Very time consuming, but well worth the effort. Each strip is 1.5 millimeters wide. When you apply the tape, it's really important not to kind of pull and stretch it over anything. You just let it fall into a natural shape, and then manipulate it around each compound curve. Those blisters are an absolute nightmare to mask. Why Airfix would think that a decal would cover that is pure fantasy. It would never work. Okay, once the strip's in place, they can remove the spacer strip, which leaves behind the strips that you need to paint. And this is the result, giving it a coat of lacquer as well. Really, really pleased how that's turned out. It was a difficult bit to do that, if it hadn't have worked out, would have been a bit of a game changer really for this model. And now we need to do the spinner, obviously getting the mask line on the spinner, which is obviously red and blue on the colour scheme. I used a pen top to mask off the front of it, I haven't painted it red, so the back needs painting blue now. That worked out quite well as well, so I'm quite happy with that. Just finding a round object that's the right shape really, and that pen top just about worked about right. Okay, I've just had to paint the band on the back of this in sky, and then I've lacquered over the back end as well, just to get the decals to bond better really. So yeah, it's just finishing off the decals, and there they are, they're all done now. So it's just a case of giving the whole thing a coat of lacquer and letting it dry. Good 24 hours at least. Very shiny at the moment. It won't stay as shiny as that. As much as it might look pretty, it's too shiny. It's not realistic. Okay, 24 hours later, and I'm just giving it a very gentle sand. This is a Tamiya sanding pad that's probably, I don't know, 3000 grit that I've been using quite a while. So it's very, very gentle, and I'm just sanding off, flattening it off to take away the shine at the moment. The plan is just to get any tiny bits of orange peel and fluff, and the difference between the thickness of the decal and the actual lacquer itself. You can't get rid of all of it. You'd have to lacquer it so much to do that. It'd be too much, but you can do it. You can get most of it out. So it's just a painstaking process. Takes about, I don't know, the model of this size probably takes about half an hour to do. Okay, now it's flatted off, we can start the polishing process. Start off with Tamiya compound. I don't start with a coarse because it's too coarse, it's unnecessary. So what I'm going to do is use the fine to start with. Just a little bit on anything really, and add a bit of water to it. The water helps it cut better as well. It gets a bit claggy if you just don't mix it with any water. And then just use a sponge that comes with the kits. And just, you don't have to press on too hard. And just polish away. Again, another half an hour's work just to do this. Looking quite reasonable at the moment. I'm just going to finish off with the final process using the finish. It's a much finer compound. I tend to use a cloth for this. I broke off one of the cannon barrels doing this. It's not difficult to glue it back on again though. Again, add a bit of water. Just polish away. You can go on forever doing this. It's if you're building model cars and stuff, you'd polish it up to the point where it looked like glass, but we don't want to do this. So just keep cracking away with that. Okay, just finishing off with all the little twiddly bits now. These are the exhaust ports of the Griffin engine. The kit is the bottom one. This is modified at the top. I've just drilled out the ports just to look a bit boring. So this is a method I use for drilling these out. You can get a very, very sharp point, and then find the centre of the round object that you're drilling out. Just make a centre punch. It doesn't have to bang it in the middle, because when I put a drill bit in there, I'm going to actually finish it off with a blade. So you can encourage the shape of it with the blade afterwards. So you just get a centre pop on each one first. I'm using a drill manually as well. I'm not using an electric drill on this one because you can go a bit too far with it and destroy the end. If you mess the end up, it's had it really. So just be careful not to go too far, and don't use a drill bit that's too wide, because you could make the wall too thin. So yeah, just drill the hole out reasonably deep. Now it's just a case of getting the point of the blade into the ends, and just creating the shape that you want really. It's not difficult. If the hole's not bang in the middle, you can encourage a bit more on one side than you can on the other. Okay, final stages. There's a little bracing strut on the back of the headrest. It's made out of plastic, obviously. It's not a very nice piece of plastic. I tend to break it, so what I've done, I've replaced it with a dressmaker's pin again. I've just chopped the tops off the head of it and then glued that in place. And there we are, that's pretty much done now. Polished up, canopy on, P2 tube fitted. There's like a little proby thing at the bottom of underneath the fuselage. I don't know what that does actually. So there we go, that's pretty much done. Thoroughly enjoyable kit to build this. I've really enjoyed this one. I just love the Spitfire. This marker Spitfire is probably the nicest looking one of the bunch, I think. Anything with a bubble top on it, and especially with the 5-blade propeller on it, I think it looks the business. So there we go, finished up. I've got to say, a gloss finish on any model is very challenging. It's much more challenging than it is if you're going to do a matte finish. put the pilot in as well. I've painted him up. It's basically an excuse to just not put seatbelts in, really. You can take him out while he comes out and pops back in again. So he adds a little bit of character and scale to the model as well, which is a bit different. So there we go. Thanks for watching. Stills to come. Please like and subscribe to help the channel out.